Imagine a resource that falls from the sky. It flows through our rivers, it fills our lakes, and it makes up 60% of your own body. It is the very definition of life. For thousands of years, civilizations have risen and fallen based on their access to this one element. We have fought wars over land, over gold, over oil, and over religion. But the next great war will not be fought for any of these. It will be fought for water. And if you look closely at the battlefield, you might realize that the war has already begun, and the enemy is not a country. It is a corporation. Today, we are diving deep into the story of the largest food company in the world, a company that has convinced billions of people to pay for something that used to be free. A company whose former CEO famously argued that the idea of water being a human right was extreme. We are going to uncover how a Swiss giant manages to pump millions of gallons of water from drought-stricken lands for pennies, only to sell it back to the locals for a massive profit. From the dried-up creeks of California to the lead-poisoned pipes of Michigan and the remote villages of Pakistan, this is the story of how Nestlé turned a public resource into a private empire. To understand how we got here, we have to go back to a moment that the company has been trying to scrub from the internet for nearly 2 decades. The year is 2005. Peter Brabeck-Letmathe, the chairman of Nestlé, is sitting for an interview for a documentary called We Feed the World. He is calm, articulate, and speaking in his native German. He leans forward and discusses the two opposing views on water. One view, he says, is that water is a public right, that every human being should have access to it. He calls this view extreme. The other view, his view, is that water is a foodstuff. It is a product. And like any other foodstuff, it should have a market value. Now let us pause for a second. In a strictly capitalist sense, he is not wrong. We pay for food, we pay for shelter. Why not water? The problem arises when you look at how Nestlé acquires this product. You might assume that if they are selling water, they are manufacturing it, or perhaps desalinating ocean water, adding value to the supply chain. But that is not what happens. Nestlé and companies like it simply extract. They find a spring, they buy the land around it, or the rights to the water beneath it, and they turn the tap on. Let us look at a specific case that boils the blood of many Americans. Strawberry Creek in the San Bernardino National Forest, California. This is a place of stunning natural beauty, but it is also a place that has been ravaged by severe droughts. In 2015, while the residents of California were being told to take shorter showers, let their lawns die, and face fines for wasting water, Nestlé was pumping, and they were pumping a lot. Records show that in that year alone, they drew out 36 million gallons of water from the Strawberry Creek watershed. 36 million gallons. And how much did they pay the Forest Service for this privilege? $524. Yes, you heard that correctly. $524. Not per gallon, not per hour, per year. That is less than the cost of a new iPhone. They took that water, bottled it under the Arrowhead brand, and sold it on shelves across the state for millions of dollars. It gets more complicated. The permit that allowed them to transport this water across the national forest had technically expired in 1988. For decades, the system was so broken, or perhaps so lobbied, that they continued to operate on a zombie permit while the ecosystem around the creek began to suffer. Environmentalists reported that the water levels were dropping so low that local wildlife was struggling to survive, but the pumps kept running. This is where the analogy of the vampire comes into play. Imagine a neighbor who comes into your house, hooks a hose up to your kitchen sink, fills up a tanker truck, tosses a single quarter on your counter as payment, and then drives to your front lawn and sells that water back to you for $2 a bottle. That is essentially the business model. It is arbitrage. It is taking a public asset, rebranding it, and selling it at a markup that rivals the drug trade. But California is just one battlefield. Let us travel to Michigan. The name Flint, Michigan, is synonymous with a water crisis. We all know the story. To save money, the city switched its water supply, corroding the pipes and poisoning thousands of children with lead. It was a humanitarian disaster. The residents of Flint could not drink their tap water. They could not bathe in it. They were desperate. While this tragedy was unfolding, just 2 hours away in Stanwood, Michigan, Nestlé was pumping hundreds of gallons of water per minute from the Ice Mountain Springs. The company was paying a nominal fee of $200 a year to the state for the extraction rights. While the people of Flint were queuing for bottled water donations, a multinational corporation was effectively draining the state's aquifer for free. The optics were disastrous. It highlighted a dystopian reality where clean water is available only to those who can afford the plastic bottle, while the public infrastructure that serves the poor is allowed to crumble. But why do we buy it? Why has bottled water become the beverage of choice for millions? This is where the marketing genius or manipulation comes in. In the 1970s, the big beverage companies realized that the market for sodas would eventually plateau. People were becoming health conscious, so they needed a new product. They looked at tap water, which was free, and they realized that to sell their own water, they had to make you doubt yours. They launched campaigns that subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, implied that tap water was dirty, unsafe, not cool. They associated bottled water with status, with health, with purity. Think about the names: Pure Life, Poland Spring, Deer Park. The imagery is always of snowy mountains, untouched glaciers, and pristine nature. It is rarely a picture of a factory in a drought zone. They manufactured a demand for a product we already had flowing into our homes for a fraction of a cent. Let us widen the lens to the global south. In Pakistan, specifically in the village of Pati Dilwan, the situation is even more dire. A former village councillor claimed that before the water company arrived, the water table was at 100 feet. Locals could easily access it. But after the deep wells were dug for the bottling plant, the water table sank to 300 to 400 feet. The local wells dried up. The water that remained turned brackish and foul. The tragic irony is that the villagers, who could no longer drink their own groundwater, were forced to buy the bottled water produced in their own backyard. But most could not afford it. So they drank the dirty water. Reports surfaced of children falling ill, of livestock dying. It is a pattern that repeats in Nigeria, in Brazil, and in small towns across North America. When a giant straw is inserted into the earth, the pressure drops for everyone else. Defenders of the corporation will argue that they are job creators. They will say that they pay taxes, that they support local communities, and that they are only using a tiny fraction of the total water available. And statistically, agriculture uses far more water than bottling plants. That is a fact. But agriculture produces food. The bottling industry produces plastic waste and a product that is often no better than what comes out of the tap. Blind taste tests have shown time and time again that most people cannot tell the difference between bottled water and tap water. In fact, nearly 25% of all bottled water is just refiltered municipal tap water. So, what happens next? As climate change accelerates, water scarcity is going to become the defining crisis of our century. The United Nations predicts that by 2025, 2/3 of the world's population could be living under water-stressed conditions. When water becomes scarce, its value goes up. And when the value of a necessity goes up, those who control the supply become the most powerful people on Earth. Wall Street is already moving. Water is now traded on the futures market, just like oil and gold. Hedge funds are buying up water rights in Colorado and Australia. The philosophical question that Peter Brabeck raised 20 years ago is no longer just a theory. We are deciding right now whether water is a human right or a commodity. If we continue to allow the privatization of our most essential resource, we risk entering a future where the size of your bank account dictates whether you get to survive the drought. It is a future where the public tap runs dry, but the private shelves are always stocked, provided you can pay the price. We need to ask ourselves, who owns the rain? Who owns the aquifer deep beneath the ground? Is it the person who owns the land above it? Is it the state? Or does it belong to all of us? This is not just about one company. Nestlé may be the biggest player, but they are symptoms of a system that values profit over survival. Every time we buy a plastic bottle because it is convenient, we are voting for this system. We are validating the idea that water should be wrapped in plastic and sold. The water wars are not coming, they are here. And the weapon of choice is not a gun, but a contract, a pump, and a plastic bottle. I want to know what you think. Is the CEO right? Should water have a market value to prevent us from wasting it? Or is access to clean water a fundamental right that should never be for sale? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive valuable, hit that subscribe button. We are just scratching the surface of how the world really works, and you do not want to miss what comes next.